everyone. Thank you, Chalise. Thank you all for having this great presentation. I got interested in HBCU newspapers back in 1998 when I became advisor for the Meter student newspaper at Tennessee State University. And all of my perspectives come from having done that. So we've all touched a little bit on media industry diversity and some of the aspects of journalism history. And I want to touch a little bit on three areas, specifically the idea of really paying attention to how these papers change over time, particularly with respect to changes in administrators and advisors, not to mention the student quality. Also, the importance of studying these papers with respect to literary history and their role in genealogy research. So first, in terms of changes over time, the Meter is an excellent example because when I came there, people were really focused on the origins of the paper. It started back in 1950 with Samuel Yette as the first editor, the man who wrote the book, The Choice. And the editor at the time was really looking to Yette for inspiration. See how the name of the paper is written in Old English style, and there was a particular flag for the paper and the way they wrote the tagline. And she went back to that same Old English style, the same tagline, the measure of student opinion and sentiment. It was almost like a sort of a Ronald Reagan Morning in America kind of moment where you build the future by going back to some of the foundations. And she brought the name for the editorial column back to the name that he used at the beginning, which was From Where I Sit. And they made so many other changes over the years that I was there. They changed the flag, the tagline, the number of pages, of course, the content itself, so many things. And then they ended up becoming the best weekly newspaper among the HBCU papers by 2006. They did so by covering really important stories well. This comment here by a judge is about how they covered the change in the presidency with all details. Of course, that kind of coverage gets you media accolades. It also gets you a lot of pushback from administrators, and both the students and I got that. And they won it a second year in a row. I mean, they were just wonderfully diligent as students. So again, looking at how things change over time and what's expected of advisors is a great thing to do. I kept a list of the awards they won while I was advisor. I don't know where the records are. I don't know what awards they won since then or before then. But again, what was going on with respect to advisorship is a good thing to study as the papers change over time. Then in 2012, after the Meter and other papers had been so good just a few years before, there were only 16 papers listed on the Black College Wire's list of online papers out of more than 105 HBCUs at that point. So the Meter wasn't on the list. These other schools that had been really hard-hitting journalistic organs earlier in the decade were no longer there. And the papers that had built the tradition of HBCU newspapers being thought of as quality organs were no longer there. So papers such as the Paul Quinn Monthly and the Fisk Herald that were spoken of among the great African-American papers in the country back in 1890 weren't on the list either. So that gets us to thinking about the importance of literary history. And the Fisk Herald is a great example of that. So again, it had an aim to really be an organ, not just for campus, but for the whole country. You see the Fisk Herald quote here saying, its aim was and still is to be a medium to inform the parents and friends of what's taking place at the university and to spread abroad the knowledge of the kind of work the institution is trying to do. Again, really looking to or understanding itself as an organ for the whole country or for the African American community in the whole country, not just on campus. And you see an example of the scroll from Atlanta University there. It was started in 1896. And then the following year, that paper too said that even though we had only intended ourselves to be for campus circulation at the beginning, it is now seeking to reach every student, ex-student, graduate, and friend of the university. And it's this kind of attitude of seeing itself as a larger country organ that made HBCUs what they were initially. And as you know, newspapers in general focused a lot on literary things and broadening the scope from looking at the Fisk Herald. It's a neat example that the great writer Charles Chestnut decided that he wanted his book to be promoted in an HBCU student newspaper, particularly in the Tuskegee Student. And so here we can see a front page of the first Fisk Herald, a front page of the first issue of that paper that Du Bois edited. There's so much, and the paper, again, it was started in 1883, so it was 130 years old back in 2013, and I got to participate in the celebration. But that means next year is its 140th anniversary, and that's a really good time to look at what's going on with these papers in general. So all of the things that happen under Du Bois's editorship are underexplored. This is one of the next to the last paper he edited. Some things are bylined, some things aren't. We don't know which things are his writings, which reflect his later positions. All of that is just great stuff to look into. Again, another thing where, is this Du Bois's writing or not? It's under his editorship. Does it reflect his later opinions? That sort of thing. And so those are the kinds of things, the basic history, the fact that it came from literary societies, anything about Du Bois. You also see many names beyond Du Bois and the big names in these papers. And so that's why they're so important for this last area, which is genealogy research.